Elmer Edward Gerdes. I was a machinist mate first class submarine service. I went through high school. I was the youngest in my class, which I started school, like, my birthday's January 13th, and the cutoff date at that time was the 20th of January. So I wasn't near as mature as I should have been, and I graduated in May after I turned 17 in January. And I goofed around that summer, did some odd jobs, bucking bales and working with my dad some. I applied several places for a job, but since I wasn't 18, no one wanted to hire me. And I hadn't really applied myself in high school. And much to my chagrin, later on I found out I have a very high IQ, but I didn't apply myself. So a friend of mine up the street, he and I, we'd bummed together through school some, and we decided to join the Navy. He was a year or two older than I was, and went to Great Lakes, and I ended up going to Great Lakes a day or two before I turned 18, so I was on what they call a kiddie cruise. Great Lakes in January, fun. So after adapting to a military lifestyle, the sister closest to me was 12 years older, and I had two sisters, and both of them got married fairly young, so I was practically raised like an only child, and I just was kind of lackadaisical. So the military was like a shock, and but I adapted, and when I got out of boot camp, they sent me to Machinist Mate A school, which basically taught you the steam turbines and the various pumps and machinery associated with that kind of equipment. It was a 12-week school. And while I was there, they asked for volunteers for submarine service. And I had watched Victory at Sea when I was a kid. And one of the reasons I joined the Navy was that, and then some of the older guys in my hometown that had been through World War II in Korea, they said, Bud, that's my nickname, they said, one thing about the Navy, you get 3 hots and a cot. And what they were talking about, you get 3 hot meals and you get a bunk to sleep in. You're not laying in a foxhole. So I thought, well, that sounds pretty good to me. So I went ahead and I volunteered for submarine service, and when I finished that, they sent me over to a school right there, I was in New London, Connecticut, sent me to a school right there on base that was for diesel engines, because the machinist mate is a steam, that's more of a surface ship, or nuclear ships use that. So I went through that, and they sent me out to San Diego, California, the USS Spinax. And at this point, between going to all these schools and taking leave, I had been in the Navy a year. So I got out there, the ship, the boat, as we refer to subs, she was tied up next to a tender, I think it was a Sperry, and we had to ride a water taxi out there. And I had a couple days leave left, so I just hung around at the Y and bummed around San Diego for a day or two, and I finally said, well, you gotta do it. So I went out, and I loved it. And probably about 3 months later, we went up to Hunters Point in San Francisco and went through an overhaul. And they did a battery change on the boat, and they did some other upgrades. And we went on sea trials, and they had taken some kind of a wire out, and it had been taped over with masking tape. And while we were out in diet, when we dove, that started leaking because it wasn't welded shut. And that was a little bit of a scary experience, but it wasn't really that big a deal. And we got out of the yard, got everything organized. I guess I've always been kind of had a little bit of a salesman in me or something, I don't know, but I was assigned to what they called a pump room, which was down under the control room. And we had there's a vent down there, and there's a tank called negative tank that when you dive, you flood it, but then you blow negative and you vent it off to get your trim balanced out on the boat, so that you're not too heavy or too light. And where that vented, there was it had rusted out on top. It followed the curve of the hull. It had rusted out. And so I talked to the workmen in the yard, and I had to do fire watches because I was a very junior man. So I had to stand over the fire extinguisher while they were welding and stuff. So I found out these guys would just about do anything for you. So I asked them if they could fix that, and they said sure. So I went in and I scraped it and painted it real good. And then they came in to weld it up, put a new cover on it. And it was only about yay high and maybe this wide, and it followed the curve of the hull. So I thought, well, that water blows up all over the place all the time because there was always some carryover. So I had him weld some baffles in there. Well, unbeknownst to me, I had built a whistle. And every time after that, when we vent negative, you could hear it. It was, and I even asked them, I had never been to a Spinax reunion before, and so I asked some of the guys, these fellows that are on board here all served after I had left. And I asked them, I said, do you remember how negative tank would make a kind of a whistle noise? They said, yeah. I said, that was me. I'm responsible for that. And then the other thing through the yard period, I'd been doing some horse trading. I got some stainless steel like kick plates made down there for the pump room and stuff to try and make things a little easier to clean and make it look nicer. So we were about 3 days from leaving the yard, and there's always some horse trading going on. And the engineering officer came up to me and he said, Gerdes, we need some, they had kick plates underneath the watertight doors between the compartments. Well, they'd been taken off and they were lost. And he said, we need some kick plates, stainless steel kick plates under those doors. And I kind of looked at him and he said, just tell the storekeeper what you need. If you need coffee or foul weather jackets or whatever, he said, you go line it up and you find out what you need, tell him, and we'll take care of it. So they knew what I was up to, all the time, which is cool. But anyway, we came back down to San Diego for, I guess, a couple months. And I remember one scary experience down there was we went out doing some drills, exercise with other ships and stuff, and they had what they call a PDC, that's a practice depth charge. And supposedly it's about the size of a hand grenade, but of course you don't get the shrapnel. And I can remember being at the trim manifold, which if you're an oiler in the engine room, you go up when you dive. One oiler goes up and runs the trim manifold. Well, by this time I had qualified to do that, and they threw a PDC from a destroyer because they were trying to catch us. And that thing went off right outside the hull, real close to that trim manifold, and it actually blew a little cork off the hull. And that kind of shook me up. It was like, wow, And that was just a practice. But then we left for Westpac, and that was quite an experience.